Michael Chandler had everyone fooled, and for so very long.
I am Dana's favorite fighter. Dana White privilege is not on the line here. I've already got it.
When he arrived in the UFC, he was the ultimate fan favorite, a Bellator legend with a workhorse mentality, a humble yet confident fighter who talked a talk, walked a walk, and quickly won over fans with his relentless fighting style and motivational speeches.
It's not that people don't do the right things, it's that they don't do the right things for long enough.
But over time, the cracks started to show, and we got a glimpse at the real Michael Chandler.
We spoke immediately after. Dude, he's just such a freaking fake dude.
The non-stop positivity felt rehearsed. The nice guy act seemed more like a marketing strategy.
It is not who he was a few interviews ago with Era Hawani, or it's not who he was when the mic's in front of him in the octagon. He was a different guy whenever we sat next to each other in Abu Dhabi and spoke.
And inside the cage, don't get me started. Chandler wasn't just bending the rules, he was outright breaking them while the referee just stood there watching him.
O que aconteceu foi que ele me deu dedo nos olhos, o meu olho que tá vermelho pra caraco.
From blatant fouls to underhanded tactics, he has now built a highlight reel that is filled with as much controversy as it is with chaos.
And I told him he's a dirty motherfucker too, for putting his fingers in my mouth and blowing his nose, and
This is the story of how Michael Chandler went from one of our golden boys to definitely the dirtiest and one of the most polarizing fighters in the sport.
A lot of the Michael Chandler shit, pretty much everything he does, immediate point taken away.
And despite the tape and receipts, he'll still look at you in the eye and tell you otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of the commentary when it comes to the misinterpretation of what the back of the head is by the unified rules of mixed martial arts, the misinterpretation of what cage grabbing is, but more than anything, I'm an honest guy. I try to live pretty full of integrity and full of honesty.
Thank you to the fighting business, absolutely amazing.
One of my favorite new channels going right now.
When Chandler made his UFC debut, he promised us a good time. Nothing controversial or phony, just professionalism, class, violence, and activity because he didn't have too long left in the game.
What you want about me in or outside of the cage, I've never once taken a backward step. I've never once been in a boring fight. I want to come forward and I want to have a good time out there. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Despite being an outsider, UFC fans appreciated his approach and welcomed him with open arms. Even more surprisingly, the UFC brass took a liking to him, even though he was not a homegrown star.
Michael Chandler will weigh in case anything happens to Habib or Justin. We're excited about that. Great kid. Now that I've got to know him a little bit, he's a great guy. So he is now part of the UFC family.
Just one KO victory over Dan Hooker, and Chandler was already getting a title shot against Charles Oliveira for the vacant belt. By the way, this Oliveira guy had built up an 8-fight win streak in the most competitive division in the sport. Chandler got it after 1. He still came pretty close to knocking him out, but DuBronx rallied and finished him, capturing the vacant title. So close to becoming a UFC champion in his second bout with the promotion. That had to sting a bit, but Chandler was gracious in defeat and all class.
Charles Oliveira is the real deal. Listen, I take nothing away from him. I will be back. I promise you I'm going to wear that UFC strap within the next 12 months.
Good on him. After the loss to Charles, Chandler faced Gaethje, and the highlight said something interesting.
So it's been a while since I fought someone I didn't like. For some reason, you're a little different.
In hindsight, at least.
Excited again to fight someone that I don't like. I have no reason not to like you, but something about your face just makes you want to.
I wonder why Gaethje didn't like him. Anyway, they fought, delivered a war, and Chandler lost. There was a little scene though. In the second round, Chandler poked Gaethje in the eye and punched him right after. Looked kinda sus on the replays, but hey, Chandler bled and got his face mangled for us, and he was all respect in the post-fight interview.
It's definitely the first time in my career that I didn't care whether I won or lost. I've been trained, we can hear our coaches. Could not hear a thing, so I was out there by myself, unfortunately. And when I'm left to my own devices, it's a lot of ill-advised things happen. But they were entertaining, so the fans won that fight.
But now he was 1-2 in the UFC, and he needed a big win, a demonstration that he belonged among the top lightweights and deserved his top 5 ranking. He got that, and it wasn't just a win, it was a moment, like KO of the year moment as he crushed Tony Ferguson with a kick to the face. That kick was so brutal that it left Tony completely motionless for a few minutes, and while he laid unconscious, Chandler decided it was a great idea to do around 8 backflips next to a motionless Tony Ferguson. Not too classy this time. There was a definite shift in the reception towards Chandler after this. Might be because of his over-the-top celebration right next to a fallen opponent, or it was because Tony was so beloved. He was still fairly liked, but not for too long.
No, Mike was very professional there. He kept it moving. But that was the first time I seen him in person since Abu Dhabi and since he went on record saying all this stuff. So when I saw him, I wanted to tell him what I thought about him and do it in interviews, but I don't do that type of stuff. I'd rather tell him when I see him. That's what that was.
Dustin Poirier did not like Chandler one bit, and from the start, you could tell there was legitimate animosity between these two. Chandler, as usual, tried to sugarcoat his way through the process, but Dustin called him out and dropped the F-bomb. Fake.
He's fake, bro. And he might be a good person at home, but my personal experience, he's fake,
Wait,
man.
You're telling me a guy who runs a YouTube podcast called Walk on Wisdom isn't who he says he is? No way.
And that if you want to soar with the eagles, you can't be pecking around with the chickens. And it's a very cliche quote.
When Chandler faced Poirier at UFC 281, he ended up proving him right. It was an important fight for both, even more for Chandler, sure, but that night, Iron Mike Chandler, the consummate professional and the nicest guy on the block who preached hustle, loyalty, and respect, committed just about every foul there is. The headbutt and back of the head shots were bad, but you can look past them as they happen occasionally, and most of the time unintentionally. But there was no mistaking Chandler's intention when he fish-hooked Poirier in an attempt to lock in a submission. But what truly triggered Poirier, and for good reason, was Chandler blowing his bloody nose on his face. I won't go into detail or play the clip, but just know this. It was disgusting and filthy. And when Chandler was asked about this in a post-fight interview, he blamed gravity. I'm not kidding.
It wasn't a malicious, weird thing, but it was definitely like, hey man, sorry you're down there, but I didn't create gravity.
Guess Dustin was right after all. Chandler wasn't as professional as he portrayed, at least not in the cage where it mattered the most. But despite the cheating Chandler did, he still ended up losing by submission in the third round, making him 2-3 in the UFC and nowhere close to a title shot anytime soon. At this point in his career, Chandler stepped away from the championship hunt and pinned all his hopes and dreams on a psychotic multimillionaire who couldn't give two shits about him. Conor McGregor.
Very smart there. He lost last 3 fights. Very smart. Took the fight McGregor. McGregor, they have same streak. Last 4 fights, they lose 3 times. He's so smart.
They did The Ultimate Fighter together, and Chandler clung on to that. And for the next 2 years of his career, he gave the same lame speech about how professional he was, how the fight was going to happen. The road for Conor goes through Nashville, Tennessee, whatever the fuck. It was the same promo every interview, and it got annoying real quick. McGregor was out there partying, getting into brawls at funerals and punching mascots, but somehow Chandler believed that they were going to finish The Ultimate Fighter 31.
All right, guys, here I am again. Conor McGregor is out of 303 versus Michael Chandler with an injury.
When McGregor pulled out of the main event of UFC 303 and took Chandler's soul without even fighting him, Chandler still kept going on about it. Every interview, every press conference, and every social media post, it was the same tired speech. Conor McGregor owes it to the fans.
His road back to the UFC goes through me. It goes straight through Nashville, Tennessee, and Michael Chandler. We've got to finish The Ultimate Fighter 31.
This fight is happening.
Conor McGregor, get your candy ass back to the octagon!
I'm the most professional and exciting guy in the sport. Please like me.
I've been doing hand-to-hand combat since I was 14 years old. I have never once pulled out of a fight, a wrestling match, never missed weight, so I've been a man of my word. They still said when he comes back, he has to fight you.
McGregor was out there doing everything except fighting, while Chandler was basically that one guy in a toxic relationship, refusing to accept the breakup. But while he was busy chasing a fight that was never going to happen, the UFC had other plans, and in a move that shocked absolutely no one, Chandler somehow ended up in a title eliminator at UFC 309 against none other than Charles Oliveira, the same guy who had already finished him for the belt, an obvious case of Dana White privilege. Chandler hadn't fought in 2 years, had been left on red by McGregor, and his last win was against a washed-up Tony Ferguson back in 2022. But sure, let's pretend like he deserved a #1 contender fight against Charles.
I like to say Chandler 1.0 was out for blood. Chandler 2.0 is out for the title. I believe I'm champion in 2025. This will be a #1 contender fight. I will be the highest ranked guy not named Arman Sarukian or Islam Makhachev. At some point we'll fight in 2025, and I will hold that belt over my head as the oldest lightweight champion.
It hatched some sort of grand plan about beating Charles, then beating Holloway for the BMF title, then defeating Islam to become the oldest UFC lightweight champion ever. And no surprise, McGregor was still on his mind. Of course he was.
The title was the #1 goal, but there is some unfinished business. Chandler versus McGregor, tough 31. It needs that
that chapter needs to close at some point.
Thankfully though, Charles derailed that master plan despite fighting Chandler and the referee at the same time. For the second fight in a row, Chandler was allowed to do as many fouls as he wanted, from grabbing the fence to hooking the gloves. But what truly irked fans were the shots to the back of the head.
Back of the head shot from Chandler. Tie him up on... Dude, these are all back of the head shots! Ref! Ref, they're all back of the head, you're watching it!
He was dog-walked and dominated for most of the fight, but when he eye-poked Charles and stunned him right after, he landed about a dozen shots there, and you can't even give him the benefit of the doubt here. Those were deliberate, and it destroyed whatever was left of Chandler's nice guy shtick he had been playing since his UFC debut.
A lot of blows to the back of the head, a lot of fence grabbing. There was also some eye pokes. I would hope that he would intervene, but nothing happened, so.
He wasn't as classy as he seemed.
I am the hardest worker in the gym. Every gym I go to, I'm the hardest worker. I live life right. I do the right things.
He wasn't the consummate professional he swore to be.
In mixed martial arts, you're not just fighting against your opponent. You're fighting against yourself.
He wasn't active like he used to be.
Created something for you guys today, talking about those times that we fail and fighting your way back to the top.
He was still exciting, but with the forced toxic positivity, despicable cheating, and unhealthy thirsting had turned the fan-favorite lightweight into one of the most divisive fighters on the roster. And hey, it's one thing for us, the fans, to dislike someone, but when the majority of your own community, including a guy like Charles, has little respect for you, that says a lot, doesn't it?
Se continuasse ali, eu poderia pagar, eu poderia ter uma lesão, eu poderia ter algo, e a vitória poderia ir pro Michael Chandler, ou eu podia até me lesionar muito mais feio.
You know, I think it's blatant fouls. A lot of the Michael Chandler shit, pretty much everything he does, immediate point taken away.
He's fake, bro. And he might be a good person at home, but my personal experience, he's fake, man. And he's a cheater. And then, dude, bro, I could go on for days. I get so amped up about this.
And, of course, I gotta end with this.
Conor McGregor, if you can ever get your house back in order, while us real professionals have been keeping the octagon warm, we're wondering where you've been, Conor. Come back and beat me.
Give it a rest, bro. At this point, McGregor has a better chance of becoming the president of Ireland than sharing the octagon with Chandler. Literally.
And now entering the octagon, the notorious president of Ireland, Conor McGregor. What fucking right I will, of course. Are you crazy? That's part of why I want to do it.
So, after everything, who really is Michael Chandler? Along the way, something changed, or should I say, the facade was slowly exposed and eventually cracked open for the world to see. It started to feel less like a genuine persona and more like a calculated performance. Here's Chandler's problem. He tries way too hard to be the John Cena of the UFC. The same rehearsed promos, the same forced grin, the same never shut up mindset that fans eventually got tired of. But while Cena was a scripted WWE character, Chandler is practicing this corny shtick on a UFC microphone, preaching professionalism outside the cage while doing the exact opposite inside of it. At some point, the act wore thin, and after years of corny, empty speeches, blatant cheating, and chasing a fight that was never going to happen, the fans and his own peers have started to see right through it and now treat him as a laughing stock. But I guess being in a loving relationship with the UFC, as he likes to repeat, has its benefits, and maybe that's all you need.